All right, get ready because today we're going deep, really deep into a place where music and math sort of collide. Sounds a little weird, right? But stick with me, this is going to be fascinating. We're diving into a paper called Game of Tones, a simple Schoenbergian serial music-making model. It's by this guy, Jose Fornari. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll know exactly what Game of Tones is, how it all connects to some pretty famous concepts, like Conway's Game of Life, Schoenberg's 12-tone music, and get this, why the fact that this music-making model is undecidable is actually super cool.
It's a really amazing intersection of, well, everything.
Let's start with where this whole thing even came from. Fornari, the guy who wrote the paper, was inspired by mathematician John Conway. Conway created the Game of Life, and sadly, he passed away in 2020.
Game of Life is such a cool concept. It's basically a grid. Like, imagine a grid on your computer screen, and each little square is a cell. And a cell can be either alive or dead. Pretty simple, right? And you have these rules that determine what happens to each cell based on the cells around it. Like if a dead cell is surrounded by 3 live cells, it comes to life. Things like that.
Yeah, I kind of remember this. So even though the rules are simple, the Game of Life can get crazy complex.
Oh, absolutely. It's wild how these simple rules can lead to completely unpredictable outcomes. You even get chaos sometimes. But the real kicker, the real mind-blowing thing, Game of Life is computationally universal.
Okay, hold on. I gotta geek out here for a sec. What does computationally universal even mean in this, Game of Life context?
I imagine Game of Life is like this, basic computer. It's just a grid with simple rules, but it has the potential to run literally any program you can think of. I'm talking like spreadsheets, video games, you name it. It's powerful, and that includes music programs.
Wait, seriously? So, Bach, Toccata, and Fugue could pop out of this Game of Life grid?
In theory, yep.
Yeah.
And Fornari, in the paper, he takes it even further, He connects this Game of Life thing with another concept that seems totally unrelated at first. This is where the 12-tone technique comes in, pioneered by Arnold Schoenberg, way back in their early 20th century.
I love Schoenberg. He was like this total musical rebel, flipping the script on scales and harmony.
Yeah, exactly. With the 12-tone technique, you chuck traditional scales out the window. You embrace all 12 notes of the chromatic scale, all those black and white keys on the piano, totally equally.
And boom, that's how you get that classic atonal sound that Schoenberg is famous for. I'm starting to see where this is going. There's these underlying structures in both Game of Life and the 12-tone technique, right?
Got it. And that's where Game of Tones comes in.
Hit me with it. What did Fornari actually do to bring those two concepts together?
So he takes the principles of Game of Life and applies them to the 12-tone system. It's like, okay, imagine a sequence of 13 tones, 12 notes, and a rest. Each one has a specific pitch, how long it lasts, and how loud it is, all assigned randomly. These tones are like those little cells in Game of Life.
I think I'm with you. So then you've got rules, like in Game of Life, and based on those rules, certain tones survive, some die off, and new ones are born, and that creates the melody.
Right, nailed it. And just like Game of Life, the rules are there, but the way the melody evolves, you just can't predict it. You end up with these super surprising and intricate musical structures.
Controlled chaos in the world of music, huh?
You could say that, and this is where we get into something that can really make your head spin. Undecidability. Both Game of Life and Game of Tones are undecidable systems.
Undecidable. So we can't know how the music will turn out just by looking at the setup.
Exactly. It's a mystery until you let it run and see what happens. This actually ties into something called the halting problem in computer science.
I've heard of the halting problem, but honestly, it's a little fuzzy in my memory.
Basically, it says there's no magic formula, no algorithm that can tell you for sure whether any program you write will eventually stop running or just keep going forever.
So in Game of Tones, we could have a melody that goes on forever. It just keeps composing itself.
Yep, pretty mind-blowing, right? Makes you think about music and creation in a whole new way. So what do you think so far?
Honestly, my mind is kind of blown. It's amazing that something so structured, so mathematical, can actually sound like music. But the big question is, does a melody created by an algorithm, does it really sound like music,
Right, that is the question, isn't it? Luckily, Fornari gives us a sample melody in his paper, a melody made by Game of Tones. We'll make sure to put a link to that in the show notes so everyone can give it a listen.
Perfect. Our listeners can decide for themselves if this algorithm is a musical genius or just spitting out random notes.
Exactly. And what's super interesting is that even though it's based on this a tonal 12-tone system, the melody kind of sounds tonal.
Hold on. Are you saying it sounds like it has a key? I thought 12-tone music is like the definition of a tonal.
It is, and that's what's so wild about it. You get this musical phrasing, almost human-like, coming out of this purely mathematical system. Even Fornari was surprised by that.
So maybe there's this hidden beauty, this structure within those strict rules, and we're just starting to figure it out. Let's pause for a second and recap what we've got so far.
Sounds good. We started with Conway's Game of Life, right? It's deceptively simple, but creates these crazy complex patterns. And remember, it's computationally universal.
Then we jumped into Schoenberg's 12-tone technique. Rules galore for creating a tonal music, totally different from Game of Life at first glance.
Right. And then Fornari comes along and connects those two seemingly totally different ideas. And bam, you get Game of Tones, an algorithm that uses the Game of Life idea to generate melodies based on the 12-tone system.
And to make it even more tricky, Game of Tones is undecidable, which means we don't know how the music will turn out until we hear it.
And to top it all off, it creates these melodies that actually sound musical, with hints of tonality and phrasing like a human composer would do. It makes you think about the connection between math, music, and creativity in a whole new light.
It really does, but what about us, the listeners? Why should we care about an algorithm making music?
That's a great question. I think what's so cool about this is that it's not just some gimmick, some tech trick. It makes you question what creativity even is. What makes something music?
Like, if an algorithm makes a melody, but there's no human emotion, no intention behind it, is it still music?
Exactly. It makes you think about the composer, about artistic expression, and whether beauty can exist without a human being creating it.
I'm hooked. Where do we go from here? What should we be thinking about after this episode?
Well, what we've talked about today is just the tip of the iceberg. Fornari kept his model simple, 1-octave basic stuff. There's so much more out there.
Meaning?
What if we took the system and expanded it? Multiple octaves, crazy rhythms, different instruments.
We'd be opening up a whole new universe of music. A universe where the composer isn't a person, but an algorithm.
You got it. And it reminds us that even with all the technology around us, there's still room for wonder.
So everyone listening, if you're even a little bit intrigued by this, check out the link to Fornari's Game of Tones files. It's in the show notes. Give that generated melody a listen.
And let us know what you think. It's incredible how even in art and music, there's always more to learn.
That's it for part 1 of this deep dive. We'll be right back to keep going with Game of Tones, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. We've only scratched the surface of Game of Tones,
Yeah.
As we were saying before, Fornari's work is like, whoa, a whole new world of possibilities.
Yeah, it's wild. It makes me think, practically, could Game of Tones or something like it actually make, real music? Symphonies, movie scores, maybe even a top 40 hit?
It's a great question. And composers, music theorists, they're already thinking about that. Imagine algorithms working with composers or even making music totally on their own.
I don't know. Part of me wonders if that takes away the human part of music. There's something special about a composer's emotions, their intentions in a piece, right?
That's a good point. It's at the heart of the whole debate about music made by algorithms. Some people say that if there's no human intention, it can't really be art.
But then again, we were just saying Game of Tones can make melodies that sound really musical. Those hints of tonality, the phrasing, it's like what a human composer would do.
Exactly. Maybe the line isn't so clear. Maybe it's not about replacing human composers, but about opening up new possibilities. Algorithms like Game of Tones could be tools for exploration.
It's funny. When I used to think about algorithm music, I'd picture these clunky robots playing instruments. But what we're talking about is totally different. It's like getting into the math behind music itself.
Yeah, it's about understanding how music is built, the patterns, the relationships, then using that to create something new.
This whole thing really brings up some big philosophical questions, If an algorithm can make something beautiful, something that moves you, does that mean creativity isn't just human?
People have been debating that for centuries, philosophers, scientists, and now with technology, it's even more relevant. It makes you wonder where creativity comes from.
Maybe we're being too narrow-minded, thinking only humans are creative. Maybe creativity is everywhere in the universe, expressing itself through a composer, nature, even an algorithm like Game of Tones.
That's a beautiful thought. It's like everything's connected, the laws of physics, the melodies that we feel.
So as we start wrapping up this Game of Tones deep dive, what's the one thing you want listeners to take away?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're living in a time of amazing creative potential. Technology is giving us new tools. The lines between art, science, technology are blurring.
And who knows what's next for algorithmic music? Maybe Game of Tones will be used to write symphonies, movie scores, or maybe it'll lead to totally new kinds of music, stuff we can't even imagine yet.
The possibilities are huge. Yeah, that's what's so exciting. We're at the beginning of something totally new.
So if someone listening wants to explore this more, what should they do?
Definitely check out the link to Fornari's paper. Listen to that Game of Tones melody. What do you think? Does it sound like music? Does it make you feel anything? And maybe try some algorithmic music tools yourself. There's lots of cool stuff online if you want to try it out.
That's a great idea. Sometimes you have to experience something to really get it. Before we send everyone off on their own musical adventures, let's go back to undecidability for a minute. It's a key part of Game of Tones, but it can be hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah, for sure. It's what makes Game of Tones so interesting. Maybe a simple example will help, like flipping a coin.
Okay, how does flipping a coin connect to Game of Tones?
Well, when you flip a coin, it's 50 heads or tails, right?
Yeah.
Even if you flip it 100 times, you can't know for sure what the next flip will be.
Each flip is separate, independent.
Right. And in the same way with Game of Tones, we know the rules, but we don't know what the next note will be or how the whole piece will go.
So it's like the algorithm's making choices, just like the coin flipping between heads and tails.
That's a perfect way to put it. That's what makes Game of Tones so unpredictable, so surprising. It's always changing, exploring, breaking the rules.
It's composing in real time, making choices as it goes.
Exactly. And that's what makes it different from traditional composition.
So everyone listening, if you're finding this as mind-bending as we are, you're not alone. Game of Tones is a concept that challenges how we think about music, creativity, even reality itself.
And that's exactly why it's worth exploring. It makes you think about the world in a new way. It reminds you that beauty can come from unexpected places.
This has been an amazing journey. I feel like I understand music in a totally different way now.
It's been great diving into this with you. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed it too.
And that's a wrap for part 2 of this episode. We'll be back in a moment to finish up this deep dive. Stay tuned. And we're back. Last part of our deep dive into Game of Tones. I don't know about you, but I'm still kind of wrapping my head around all this.
It's a lot, that's for sure. It makes you think about music and creativity in a whole new way.
One thing that really stuck with me, what if Game of Tones could create music that we, as humans, just couldn't even understand?
That's interesting, because it's undecidable, right? There could be whole symphonies hidden in Game of Tones that we'll never hear. Like, the algorithm just never gets to a point where it sounds like a finished piece to us. It's kind of humbling, you know?
Yeah, it is. Like, this algorithm is tapping into some musical dimension that we can't access. What else is out there that we just don't even perceive?
It's a good reminder that we don't know everything. There's so much potential for discovery. Maybe someday we'll figure out how to unlock those hidden symphonies.
That would be amazing. But for now, I think it's cool enough to just appreciate what we have found.
Totally. Fornari's work is a big deal. It opens up so many possibilities for music and tech.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, one last thing for our listeners to think about. Remember, Fornari only explored a tiny bit of what Game of Tones can do.
Right, just one octave basic stuff. What if we expanded it? More octaves, complex rhythms, different instruments, music from all over the world.
What kind of music would come out of that? Would it even sound like music to us? Or would it be something totally new, something that changes how we understand sound and art?
I hope those are questions we all keep thinking about as we explore music and technology.
And that's what I love about deep dives like this. It's not just about learning facts. It's about getting curious, using your imagination, and ending up with more questions than answers.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep learning, dive into Fornari's work, try out those algorithmic music tools, see where your curiosity takes you.
You might just start the next musical revolution. Until next time, keep those ears open for the unexpected.
And who knows, you might just hear those hidden symphonies waiting to be found.
That's all for this deep dive into Game of Tones. We'll see you next time for another adventure into the world around us.